Also this morning, I want to acknowledge Silver Cross mothers. They are chosen each year by the Royal Canadian Legion to lay a wreath during the Remembrance Day ceremony at the National War Memorial in Ottawa on behalf of all mothers who have lost children in the service of their country. The title is named for the Silver Cross, a medal awarded to each mother by the King or Queen of Canada. Maureen Anderson is this year's Silver Cross mother. She lost two sons, Sergeant Ron Anderson and Sergeant Ryan Anderson, both from PTSD. This morning, I remember Corporal Zarilla, Canadian Armed Forces Corporal Nathan Zarilla, was shot and died 10 years ago on the 22nd of October 2014 while standing guard on ceremonial duty at the Canadian National War Museum War Memorial in Canada. Nobody comes home the same as they left. God, our refuge and strength, bring near the day when wars shall cease and poverty and pain shall end, that the earth may know the peace of heaven through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Last year when I spoke, the war in Ukraine was still on. The Israelis were getting ready to invade Gaza, and there was conflict in Africa. Today, the war in Ukraine is still going on. Israel has been in Gaza for a year. They are fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran, and the Houthis in Yemen. There is still conflict in Africa, and the gangs in Haiti are trying to take control. 1960, July 1st, John Diefmaker recited his promise, something that I have held on to for years. I am a Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to worship God in my own way, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, or free to choose who shall govern my country. This heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and all mankind. Diefenbaker spoke these words 15 years after World War II. Had Canadians not stepped up for military service, we may all be walking around saying Sieg Heil. Canada had made itself known on the world stage. World War II and Korea saw Canada as a well-respected country with a large military. Peacekeeping further enhanced our standing. However, successive governments began downgrading the military and restricting the amount of money paid for defense. Our current government just removed $1 billion from the Canadian Armed Forces budget. General Rick Hellier, commanding of the Armed Forces, 2006. He said in the National Post this year, and he recites stories of those who pay the price of our freedom must be told. Canadian heroes inspire me, especially now in a time when cynicism and self-interest often dominate. These men and women who answered when the call of duty was most urgent are true heroes among us. Some are with us in spirit only. The legendary Ernest "Smoky" Smith, the unbelievable Tommy Prince, brave Andrew Minarski, and tough Francis Pigamagobo. Others are physically among us: Willie McDonald, Pat Towers, Bill Fletcher, Rick Stacy, Jeremy LeBlanc, Sean Teal, John Bars, Jack Giroud, Kendra Storty, and others. They inspire me every day. Their deeds a living testament to their unwavering commitment to Canada. They are Canadians who served our great nation in the uniform of our country. Soldiers, sailors, aviators, and yes, family members. These individuals embody the very essence of courage, moral and physical. Their service indubitably strengthened the fabric of our society. Their stories are not just about battles fought and won, but profound lessons in patriotism, sacrifice, and the enduring spirit of service. Their chests are lined with medals, each one recognizing their dedication, courage, integrity, service, and sacrifice. These Canadian heroes gave so much to us and asked almost nothing in return. They inspire me, especially now, in a time when cynicism and self-interest often dominate. It is a poignant truth that the inspiration from these heroes remain confined to those very few who are aware of them. Most Canadians have no idea who they are. I pose the question: do any one of you know of one Victoria Cross member in Canada? I pose another question: how many are wearing this? Our education system don't teach them. Canadian media doesn't cover them. Our entertainment industry has not seen fit to showcase them, and so they languish in obscurity. Unlike our neighbors to the south, where Hollywood has brought the stories of military heroes to the screen, the sacrifices of our heroes and their tales remain largely untold. In the United States, there would have long ago been a movie about Smoky Smith, Victoria Cross winner. A rough and tough, hard-drinking, scrappy soldier who in a few hours one night in Italy in 1944 destroyed a German tank, a self-propelled gun, and the accompanying infantry. I will talk about him later. And holding a critical position, this larger-than-life, often demoted Canadian from Vancouver is a storyteller's dream, just not in Canada. Those among us now are even less known, if that's possible. If you knew, how could you not be inspired by young baby-faced Jesse LaRochelle from Nipissing, Ontario, whose valor on October 14, 2006, during a magnificent strong point in Afghanistan. After being wounded, won the Star of Military Valor, Canada's second highest award for valor in the presence of the enemy. Quiet, soft-spoken Jess inspired us with his loyalty to his battle buddies, his mission execution, despite a detached retina, a broken back, and concussions, bleeding eardrums, and a shortage of ammunition. Many of us believe he should be a Victoria Cross recipient. Unfortunately, we lost Jesse at the age of 40 to his wounds from that day. These stories are not just military tales. They're quintessentially Canadian stories of resilience, perseverance, and bravery. They deserve to be heard because of their stories lie not only the history of our armed forces, but the very ethos of what is meant to be a Canadian. Willie McDonald's obvious courage and Pat Tower's quiet leadership remind me constantly of the strength that lies when Canadians, Jeremy LeBlanc and Rick Stacey, with their ongoing commitment, exemplify the enduring spirit of service that defines them, our armed forces, and our country. None of them wear the Canadian Victoria Cross. Canadian Victoria Cross was created in 1993 to replace the British Victoria Cross, our highest recognition of valor in the face of the enemy. The Canadian Victoria Cross was brought into being by then Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, a leader who understood the power of pride and country. 20 have been minted by the Royal Canadian Mint and are held at Rideau Hall. None have been awarded. These stories are not just about the past, they're about the present and the future. They are a reminder of the price of freedom and enduring strength of the human spirit. We are reminded that even in the face of the greatest challenges, excuse me, there are individuals among us who rise above, who put service before self, and who in doing so inspire us all to be better Canadians. To those mentioned, and so many more, I offer my deepest gratitude. Your courage, your sacrifice, and your commitment to our nation inspires me every day. It is now our duty as Canadians to ensure your stories are told and that your service continues. As we attend Remembrance Day services tomorrow, we need to think about the service and dedication of women and men in our armed services. We also need to realize that war is not one set piece. War is made up of many pieces that fit together to make a victory. Throughout history and going back to biblical conflicts, armies would meet on the battlefield, line up on opposite sides, and fight. When one side ran away, the battle was over, and the one that stayed on the battlefield won. That standard of battle did not change much until World War I. In World War I, armies were smarter and built trenches, but soldiers had to leave the trenches to fight. The use of a machine gun left the attacking side devastated. When we look at World War I battles and remnants today, one has to wonder what it was like for men to live in knee-deep water each day. Okay, Francis Paragamagovo. I hope I've said that right. Following the outbreak of World War I, Paragamagovo volunteered for service with the Canadian Expeditionary Force. In August of 1914, despite Canadian government discrimination that initially excluded minorities, he was posted to the 23rd Canadian Regiment Northern Pioneers. After joining the Canadian Force, he was based at Canadian Force Base Valcartier. While there, he decorated his army tent with traditional symbols, including a caribou, the symbol of his clan. In early October 1914, he was deployed overseas with the 1st Canadian Infantry Battalion of the 1st Canadian Division. The first contingent of Canadian troops sent to fight in Europe. His companions there nicknamed him Peggy. In April 1915, Paramagubo fought in the Second Battle of Ypres, where the Germans used chlorine gas for the first time on the battlefield. It was during this battle that he began to establish a reputation as a sniper and scout. Following the battle, he was promoted to Lance Corporal. His battalion took part in the Battle of the Somme in 1916, during which he was wounded in the left leg. He recovered in time to return to the 1st Battalion as he moved to Belgium. He received the military medal for his carrying messages along the lines during these two battles. Initially, his commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Creighton, nominated him for the Distinguished Conduct Medal, citing his disregard for danger and faithfulness to duty. It was downgraded. The one with the medals up, please. No, World War I medals.
It might not be there, Bob.
Oh.
Might be my mistake.
Okay. So he deserved the campaign medals for the First World War. And you've probably all seen them at one time or another.
There you go. Oh, there they are.
Ah, there they are. So on the right-hand side is the military medal. Those bars mean that he received it a second and third time. To the right of that medal is the World War I campaign medals. I asked anybody from England if they know what they were called. So there's a cartoon there called Pip, Squeak, and Wilfred. That's what those medals are known as. So Pip is the penguin, Squeak is the dog, and Wilfred is the rabbit. Only the British. November 6, 1917, Pegamagobo earned a bar to his military medal for his actions in the Second Battle of Passchendaele. During the fighting, Pegamagobo Battalion was given the task of launching an attack at Passchendaele. By this time, he had been promoted to the rank of corporal, and during the battle, he was recorded playing an important role as a link between the units of the 1st Battalion's flank. When the battalion's reinforcements became lost, Pegamagobo was instrumental in guiding them and ensuring that they reached their allotted spot in time. August 30th, 1918, during the Battle of the Scarpe, Pegamagobo was involved in fighting off a German attack in a trench. His company was almost out of ammunition and in danger of being surrounded. Pegamagobo braved heavy machine gun fire and rifle fire by going into no man's land and brought back enough ammunition to enable his post to carry on and assist and repulsing heavy enemy counteroffensives. For these efforts, he received his second bar, becoming one of only 39 Canadians to receive the honor. Sergeant Tommy Prince. That's what I call a row of medals. Thomas George Prince was an Indigenous advocate, born 25th of October 1915 in Petersfield, Manitoba. He died 25th of November 1977 in Winnipeg. Tommy Prince of the Broken Head Ojibwe Nation is one of the most decorated Indigenous war veterans in Canada, having been awarded a total of 11 medals for his service in the Second World War and Korean War. During the Second World War, Prince had been posted to the Devil's Brigade. There is a movie about the Devil's Brigade. It was a Canadian and American entwined unit. So, which was an American-Canadian unit. In Italy, the Devil's Brigade near Latoria was involved with the German artillery. In November 2019, I got that wrong. First Special Services, November 2019, Bravery Army documents were produced of the First Special Service Forces assault on Monte Majo. I don't think I spelled that right, but in the documentary, Prince's accomplishments were described while showing the actual location. After breaking through the German Bernhard Line, the First Special Service Force was then moved to Anzio, where a U.S. and Allied landing had been contained and was heavily under attack. The First Special Service Force, now comprising about 1,200 men, was tasked with holding several miles of perimeter against the German division. On February of 1944, near Latoria, Prince was sent forward by Lieutenant Colonel Gaudet to report the location of several German assembly points, including artillery positions. When Prince failed to return the following day, Gilday feared that he had been killed or captured by the Germans. However, Prince suddenly emerged from the darkness into Gilday's post 2 nights later and reported to Gilday how he had found a deserted farmhouse close to a major German gun position. With Prince still observing from inside the farmhouse, German patrols had arrived and occupied the house. Prince had managed to elude the Germans, who were searching the house without being discovered, and then hid in the attic for another day until they left. The following night after this report, Prince was sent back to Gilday by Gilday to the same farmhouse, bearing thousands of feet of communications wire. From the abandoned farmhouse, about 200 meters from the enemy assembly area, he could report the location of their emplacements. The next day, an artillery duel developed as the Allies attempted to knock out the guns reported by Prince. And one of these rounds cut the telephone line. Prince discovered some farmer's clothes in a closet in the house. He found some tools in the farm shed and walked out dressed as a farmer, weeding the crops located between the Germans and the Canadians. So he walked along the line until he found the break. He bent down, pretending to tie his shoes. He got up and shook his fist at the Germans, and then shook his fist at the Canadians, and then continued on. When Prince returned to the forest, physicians made his report. Lieutenant Gilday asked Prince about the identity of the Italian farmer who had been observed near his position, that if he had been apprehended by the Germans while in the peasant's clothes. Prince said, "No, it was me." And Gilday explained to him that he could have been executed as a spy. He was awarded the military medal. His citation reading part, Sergeant Prince's courage and utter disregard for personal safety were an inspiration to his comrades and a marked credit to his unit. Gilday's decision to recommend Prince for the medal immediately launched for this action. He was awarded the military medal. His citation reading in part, Sergeant Prince's courage and utter disregard for personal safety were an inspiration to his fellows and a marked credit to his unit. Gilday's decision to recommend Prince for this medal immediately launched the reputation of Tommy Prince among soldiers in the 1st Special Force, as well as other Allied units. Prince would change his boots and don moccasins, which he carried in his backpack. Whenever he required a silent movement, he would sneak past German security guards at night wearing moccasins. He would enter the enemy's sleeping quarters. He would leave messages for them. Every once in a while, using his knife, he would dispatch a soldier. When he died, he was honored at his funeral by the First Nations and the United States. Andrew Charles Mynarski. The Second World War began in September 1939. In 1940, Mynarski joined the Royal Winnipeg Rifles Regiment. A year later, he enlisted with the Royal Canadian Air Force. He trained in Edmonton, Calgary, and Macdonald, Manitoba. And then beginning in January 1943 in England, Mynarski trained in gunnery on the Wellington and Halifax bombers. He and other Canadians trained at a series of English bases until they were gathered to serve together rather than in British units. In 1944, Mynarski was posted with 419 Moose Squadron, 6th Group, an all-Canadian squadron in the Royal Air Force. He flew his first mission over Nazi-held France in a Halifax bomber. The air service was extremely dangerous. Over 8,000 Commonwealth airmen died of non-operational flying and training accidents. While flying, crews fought extreme cold that sometimes resulted in frostbite, along with frustrating air pressure and oxygen levels. They also dealt with the stress of knowing that at any time they could be shot down by enemy aircraft. The Halifax bombers were replaced by Canadian-built Lancasters. The new and larger planes had a 7-member crew, boasted a larger wingspan. They flew in formation over enemy targets at speeds of up to 450 kilometers per hour and could carry 6,350 kilograms of bombs. After Lancaster training, Mynarski flew missions to targets in Belgium, France, and Germany. The targets were marshalling yards, military camps, radar stations, in industrial areas of cities. The bombing was part of the preparation for the planned Allied ambitious landing on France's Normandy coast, D-Day, on June 6, 1944. On that day, Mynarski and his compatriots flew missions to targets in France. The targets were coastal batteries, bridges, crossroads, and marshalling yards to prevent or at least slow the advancement. On the 11th of June, 1944, Mynarski was promoted to pilot officer. The next night, he and his crew were preparing to embark on their 13th mission, when he spotted a lucky four-leaf clover in the grass near their plane. He gave it to his friend, rear gunner Pat Brophy. The Lancaster squadron roared over the English Channel toward their target, the Nazi-held rail yards at Cambrai. Mynarski was at his usual position as the mid-upper gunner. Around midnight in the sky over Cambrai, the Lancaster was coned, that is, lit up by giant searchlights, making it a target for enemy aircraft and artillery. The captain quickly banked the plane upwards out of the lights, and while descending down, was attacked at 5,000 feet by an enemy fighter aircraft. The Lancaster's two-port engines failed, the plane caught fire and began plummeting to the earth. And show the next slide with his medal. The captain ordered everyone to parachute to safety. As the crew began bailing out, Mynarski noticed that Brophy was missing. He ran through the flames to Brophy's post and saw that he was unable to extricate himself from the rear gun turret due to malfunctioning hydraulics. With his clothes and parachute on fire, Mynarski repeatedly smashed a fire axe into the turret, but was unable to free his friend. Brophy screamed at Mynarski to save himself. Realizing the futility of the efforts, Mynarski crawled through flaming hydraulic fluid to escape hatch. He then came to attention, saluted his friend, then jumped into darkness. Brophy miraculously survived. When the flaming Lancaster crashed to the ground, Mynarski had parachuted to safety. However, he had suffered extensive burns. French farmers rushed him to a hospital where he died. So on the right is the Victoria Cross. It is a British cross. That is actually the Canadian cross. It says pro valor. The British cross says for valor. So obviously they got it mixed up there. But that's okay. The one on the right is the Military Star of Courage. And now we go to Sergeant Smokey Smith. Private Sergeant Ernest Smokey Smith, who died in Vancouver at 91, was Canada's last living recipient of the Victoria Cross, the Commonwealth's highest award for valor. He was also the kind of hellraiser who drove superior officers in the Seaforth Highlanders to distraction during their long, deadly campaign. On many of those days, a hellraiser was just what was needed. The citation described his heroic defense of a vital bridge across Italy's Savio River. During a furious enemy counterattack, using a Tommy gun and anti-tank weapons and what else he could scrounge, he wiped out 2 German self-propelled guns, a Panther tank, killed 4 attacking soldiers, repelled 6 others, carried a wounded comrade under fire to medical aid, then returned to guard the road. Smith returned to a hero's welcome in his hometown. Married his wife-to-be, and then enlisted in the Korean War. Canada's longest Second World War campaign was in Italy. Canadian forces served in the heat, snow, and mud. One of the veterans said he didn't like Italy because everything was up. Germans were always at the top, shooting down. 26,000 Canadians became casualties. The tactics that they had used in Sicily applied throughout the Italian campaign. When one line was breached, the Germans quickly withdrew to another. Private Jeff LaRochelle. Canada's role in the Afghanistan War began in late 2001. Canada sent its first element of soldiers secretly in October 2001 from Joint Force 2, and the first contingent of regular CFA soldiers arrived in Afghanistan in January and February. Is this fresh? Good. Much better. The operations were aimed at identifying and neutralizing Al-Qaeda members in that country and toppling the Taliban regime, which was supporting international terrorism. Canada's role in the Afghan conflict grew in 2006 when Canadian troops relieved U.S. forces in Kandahar, taking command of a multinational brigade in the region during a major Taliban offensive. Jess Randall LaRochelle is awarded Special Military Valor. Young guy. He is a Canadian war hero. He was awarded the Star of Military Valor for bravery, a campaign that was launched in 2006. In 2021, a lobby has been started to upgrade him to the Victoria Cross. Jess LaRochelle was born in Resolute, Ontario, the son of Randall LaRochelle and Anna. His maternal grandfather fought in the Korean War as a sergeant in the Royal Canadian Artillery. He had another brother. Upon graduating from high school, is that me? LaRochelle joined the Canadian Army, serving with the 1st Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment. On October 14th, 2006, Jess LaRochelle was manning an observation point with on Charles Company's flank. The company was positioned around Pashmula, guarding a road between two Canadian bases. La Rochelle was the machine gunner for the observation post. When it was destroyed by an enemy rocket fire, although he was alone, severely injured, and under sustained enemy fire in his exposed position at the ruined observation post, he aggressively provided covering fire over the otherwise undefended flank of his company's position. While 2 members of the personnel were killed and 3 others were wounded in the initial attack, Private La Rochelle's heroic actions permitted the remainder of the company to defend their battle positions and to fend off the sustained attack of 20 insurgents. His valiant conduct saved the lives of many members of his company. Jeff's injuries were only treated after the ramp ceremony, where he helped carry the coffins of his 2 dead platoon members to the aircraft to return home. I'm almost finished. As I was researching this, I come across a photograph. And upon researching the photograph, this was a medic who was driving his little machine to a conflict. He hit an IED on the road, blew up his machine, and lost both legs. In the photograph, he's walking his son to school. And his son is a step ahead of him, looking down for cracks so that his father wouldn't fall. During the battle of Operation Medusa, Canada ran out of ammunition. The soldiers didn't have 20 millimeter shells for their guns. Also, General David Fraser, in his book about the operation, says, I needed a tank. We don't have any tanks. So they had to go to a memorial, probably some legion somewhere, rip the tank off the cement pedestal, get it moving, and ship it over to Afghanistan. I think that we have a lot to thank for. We today have had good lives. And we have to remember them. I talked to my brother last night. A story that I was sure was true, but I wanted to confirm it. My father, who was a commando, talked about a bridge and flying in a glider. That was Pegasus Bridge. They landed right at the bridge, jumped out of their gliders, and captured the bridge. It's an amazing story. Highway of Heroes.
The day I shipped out, they numbered a dozen. Upon my return, we're 100 or so. From the coast and from the prairies, I bet they keep coming. Add one more name from Ontario and carry me home down the highway of heroes. People above with the flags flying low. Carry me softly down the highway of heroes. True patriot love, there was never more. I served with distinction, no visions of glory. I served without question, a personal gain. Seek no justification, it's not part of my story, and it offers no comfort to the ones who remain. Just carry me home down the highway of heroes. People above, the flags flying low. Carry me softly down the highway of heroes. True patriot love, there was never more. Took up my vocation, I was called by my nation without hesitation. My answer I gave. Now I'm not wondering the things that I